these are very similar to what is being seen across other professions, nursing especially, medicine, physical therapy. So first and foremost, time. Time to learn the concept, time to figure out how to put it in there, time to just find in general to talk about it, to read about it, to whatever about it. So everybody feels like they don't have enough time in their day, period, let alone when a whole new concept comes up regarding your profession. Another big thing is role strain. As I mentioned, some of our educators in this were also working clinical. So they may have 1 or 2 sports that they're covering in season, as well as preparing for their classes. And also some of them are going to have a research component, or at least a service component to committees. So how do you distribute yourself to all those places and still stay up to date on this information? Knowledge. Going back to the gentleman I worked with at Marietta. He said, I don't have the knowledge. I don't have time to go and get it. I'm not going to get it unless somebody hand delivers it to me. Okay? A lot of people are feeling that way. Their knowledge is out there. There are the weekend courses. There are online tutorials, but that takes money. So we need to find a way to overcome that in order to get there. Also within that, the clinical to educational gap. So we're teaching it in the classroom, but our clinicians aren't doing it. So they're not seeing it practiced. They're not able to make that connection. So they're seeing us in the classroom potentially, and this is just a real life example that one of the participants gave. They said, I tell my students, teaching them based on the literature, that ultrasound for 5 minutes at these settings is not effective for increasing heat. But every time they go to the athletic training room in the afternoon, that's what they're constantly doing, 5 minutes of ultrasound on somebody's quadricep muscle. I know from a research base, multiple studies have been done, that does not work. It doesn't do anything. But they're doing it every day when they go into the clinical setting. So how do you overcome that? How do you teach it, not see it, and expect the student to retain it and decide to practice that way when they graduate? Strategies. So after they identified their barriers, they started going through their strategies. First and foremost, they all said it in one way, shape, or form, was start somewhere. Get together with your faculty. Go to a session yourself. Find a way to make it happen. Don't expect everybody to follow you, but you at least need to be a leader for yourself and go and grasp that information. The second, spread it out. Get as many other faculty involved as you possibly can, whether that stays within your university or you find other universities as well. And again, that was kind of my motivation was, now that I've got this information, I can't just keep it for me. I've got to disseminate it to others so we can start making it more of a broad concept instead of just something that I'm personally doing. So within this, to reiterate that need, addressing some of these major issues in athletic training that again, unless you're in it, you don't realize what the other issues are, but some of them do cross over as well. So reimbursement, effectiveness of our clinical interventions. Again, we have some equipment. Well, you guys won't know the names of the equipment, but the bottom line is there's no evidence out there to say that it works at all. Why are we doing it? We can't reimburse for it. We can't prove that it's helping anyone. All it's doing is taking 20 minutes of a clinician's time. Do we really need to keep doing that? Accountability, again, we don't really have it. Students as future stakeholders. A lot of times students have that tunnel vision, right? They're like, I just need to do what I need to do right now so I can get a job. They don't think about 30 years from now, they're going to be the ones making these decisions. By the time we get reimbursement, they're going to be the ones that are in charge. So we need to try to get them a little more invested at this point. And then the obvious expansion of the body of knowledge, both clinically, educationally, and student-based. We need to establish EVP as a necessary component of AT practice and preparation. So we're doing it from the educational side, but we need to figure out ways to get it to our clinicians and have them actually implement it as well. That's one of the biggest things that we're fighting right now. Institutional support for EVP and growth. Again, a lot of times that's going to take money to get that started. It's going to take opportunities. Very fortunate here at CCU to have the emphasis on EVP, so we know that those resources are there. So we're not really struggling with that, but a lot of other institutions are. There's that clinical to educational gap again. This is huge. Didactic and clinical are not matching up, at least in our profession. Scholarly and clinical activity, we have a very limited amount of scholarly activity being produced. And what is being produced is not being produced by the clinicians. So how are we going to make that gap narrower if the people that are having the questions, okay, you don't want me to use this machine, what do you want me to use, if they never pose those questions to anybody that has the capability and the resources to do that research. We need to have a refined approach from both of these sides, clinical and educational. Find a way for them to work together. Have the clinicians pose the questions. Have the scholars do the research. Have them meet together on those discussion points and the conclusion points. See what we can get out of that. So, quotable from the barriers aspect. The clinical part and the research have to come together. And sometimes the clinical part has to take down some of their old thoughts and come to a new way of thinking and saying, this is really better. And we really need to do this regardless of how comfortable we feel with it. And that's something that we're struggling with, at least in athletic training. It probably was like this, I would say, in the early stages with some of the other professions. But really people saying, well, this is the way I've always done it. That's not comfortable to me. I'm going to be hands off with this. Well, this is a process that, as evidenced within other professions, is really here to stay, and we should start to base our clinical practice around it. So we have to start to jump over that. Now, solving those barriers, I can't give an exact answer to that. Every institution is different. Every place of employment is different. How they solve this at a clinic is going to be far different from how they solve it at the university level. So each person's going to have to do kind of a critical appraisal of their current situation in order to try to overcome what's specific to their unique setting. So what we're starting to lean towards in athletic training as well is starting to establish some best practices. Our journal and our monthly publication have started moving towards including clinical bottom lines. So it'll present short snippets of research sometimes and kind of say a clinical bottom line, here's what you can consider as kind of the important aspects of this article. Really trying to spoon feed the evidence to people. Competencies, as I said, this is starting to be infused for the 2012-2013 school year. Excuse me. So, current edition is coming to that. Future editions are going to expand on it even more and look to demonstrate actual patient outcomes as a result of this practice that we're starting to develop. This is from one of our races in Virginia Beach. Our whole doctoral program used to do a lot of team and training things. So, lots of fun there. So some of our conclusions. There is a need for infusion of EVP within our undergraduate education, and it's becoming part of our entry-level preparation. We need to emphasize it. We need to offer support, experience, and open-mindedness to this concept. So again, financial support, access to the seminars, the online tutorials, all of those pieces of information. With the experience, those that are doing it need to share it with others. Those that have clinical experience, I've seen this, and this work, they need to disseminate that to everyone and not just sit on it and keep it for themselves. Other thing is open-mindedness. They need to be open to the conversation. Both educators need to appreciate that this is going to take time for clinicians to grasp, and the clinicians need to be open-minded to hear the conversations from the educators. Now, we're hoping that as we're preparing these students now, that some of this is going to go away a little bit because soon our practicing clinicians will have been prepared in this way, so it's not going to be such a foreign concept. But until that happens, we need to figure out how to get the people that have been out 10 plus years like me, who have never heard of this before, how are we going to get to them and get them to start infiltrating it within their practice? Various teaching strategies, take a look at those, evaluate them, make sure we're focusing on the longitudinal structure. And again, that comes in the work practice setting too. You don't just want to dump everything on a person at once, kind of build it in as we go. Future directions, expand the knowledge, both as related to the students and to the educators and to the clinicians that are doing the current practice. Assess the teaching strategies that exist and as they are developed, see if they are actually effective. Make sure that you're targeting to the specific learning styles and demographics of different institutions. What works here might not work at another institution. What works there might not work here. So make sure you're taking and personalizing it. One of the things that we haven't been able to evaluate yet because it is so new is are students retaining EVP? Really only for the last 5 years has it been in there. And that initial 5 years ago, those few classes that were getting it are just now getting into clinical practice, and that's probably from about 3 schools nationwide that were doing that 5 years ago. So we have a very small pool of people that we can assess right now regarding retention. In 5, 7 years, a lot more, hopefully we'll really be able to make big strides in this area as far as retaining an application from our current students. So that's that next piece is not only did they retain it, did they implement it, and then If they implemented it, are we seeing a difference in patient outcomes? Now again, if we don't have our clinicians starting to track patient outcomes, how are we going to know if we're having any success with this EUP? So right now, athletic training-wise, we're facing a kind of a big realm of issues that we need to solve in order to even see if, or at least make strides toward, before we can even see if EUP is being effective within our profession. So this is kind of how it all comes together, just general areas of what I'm currently interested in, looking primarily at the educational programming and the knowledge piece, really getting it out to those who need it or those that don't have it. From there, we can look at the attitudes and the use. We know, common sense tells us, if you have a positive attitude about something, you're probably going to use it. So we need to start to change those attitudes a little bit, and then we can finally get to this patient outcomes piece by combining all four of those together. So that is where we are headed.